chapter 1.10, part 6. This will be the last segment. So that's that little detail of the mirror. So we used formal analysis in the beginning. We were talking about elements and principles. Contextual analysis, we got into that. We identified the members of the Spanish court. Biographical analysis, the artist's desire for status. And that's really what he achieves, or he's trying to achieve in this painting. Excuse me. And iconographic analysis, meaning behind the cross on his chest. Okay, so we looked at all these different methods of analysis. Then we're going to conclude that he wanted to raise the status of painters and raise his own status as well. It was important to him, and so he used his elements and principles in a kind of self-conscious way. That's why it's good for us to use in this example. Okay, so the influence, we're 300 years later, and Picasso at 76, toward the end of his life, he decides to do his copy of it. And we did just look at, looked at several different takes of the Odalisque in this chapter, and we looked at Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, and this is something that artists do. They look at these masterpieces, and they go through a series of emotions, but I will say that they're intimidated or they're respectful, and you just see these great canvases like Las Meninas, and you're just so blown away and impressed, and then you're intimidated because you're trying to paint as well, and then you're thinking, okay, I'm a pretty alright painter, which obviously Picasso at 15, was a phenomenal painter. So he's decided at this point in his life he would like to study Las Meninas and his fellow Spanish master from 300 years prior, and he wants to take a chance and try to paint a copy of it himself. And that's something that artists often do, usually earlier in life. This is later in life for him. So we see our dark figure here of Nieto against this open doorway. We see Mariano, and we see some figures over here, the dogs there. This one particular figure is turned into just an outline and a white space. And then the artist is sort of floating up here. I kind of also think he looks extraordinarily tall, because I think that's the time, not only the time that Picasso's living in. Artists are super important. Picasso himself is, of course, super important by this point in time. So he locks himself in this room and he paints 45 paintings in response to this masterpiece. That's on page 186. And he's mimicking to a degree, but he's using elements and principles differently. He's not using linear perspective. He's not doing a realistic portrayal. Everything is very abstracted. So Margarita is outlined and kind of flattened and strange looking. We barely identify her other than the fact that we know this painting and we know that shape of the dress and where she would be in the painting. So he's really taking this into a much more abstract way of looking at the work. He saw Las Meninas as a boy, and he's having to look at artwork. This piece, he's looking at a poster that he has in his studio. He can't go back to Spain, and if you remember, if we talked about, I may have not put that in this semester, but Guernica, in the 30s in Spain, Franco bombs this town and thousands of people die. So Picasso's famous masterpiece about Guernica is up, and he says he won't go back to Spain till Franco's out of power. And I can't remember, but it's very close. Franco lives almost as long as Picasso does. So it's very frustrating. Picasso never goes back to Spain. He never gets to see this painting in person again. So it could be part of that personal frustration as well. He painted 45 paintings, much more abstract. Oh, his own dog. Okay, so we have a comparison here of the two. different sort of shape. It's more landscape, and this one's more portrait oriented. It's tall, and this one is wider. But you can see where some of the figures, the dog is right there, Margarita's here. She got shifted over a little bit. The artist is giant and floating upward. Although the cross is still there. If you look there, our Order of Santiago is there, and the paintings are still sort of in the same places. Those light fixtures or hooks or whatever they are sort of there but flattened out. Okay, last piece that we get into. This is really your job in the assignment to pick this apart, but we want to think about this having the same thing as Las Meninas, where it has formal considerations and it has context and meaning, okay? So it's not highly representational. It still has this ladder-like structure in here and some geometric shapes and lines, and it has a lot of chaos. So their story here, and there was an interesting take on this, an episode of that PBS series, The Crown, is that right? I'm trying to remember where it was. But anyway, the Queen goes and visits the site a little bit after the fact, where the coal tips spilled at Ativan, and killed a bunch of people. Aberfan, and basically it was like a loose mountain of debris from the coal mines and water. There was this natural spring, but also water from a heavy rain saturated it, and it started moving and turned into this sludgy landslide, and it covered a small grammar school, which was really unfortunate because they were just about to go out for vacation. But unfortunately, the timing was bad, and many people died, especially children. So it was quite sad, and I think he was trying to, for quite a long time, to figure out a way to show this chaotic feeling and this sense of frustration. So he's weaving through a lot of organic shapes, geometric shapes, and I'm not going to give you too much more than that. But you see a lot of repetition. Really study the areas and describe them. There are 3 panels, so it should give you a lot of room to get into different elements and principles. But of course, this is a black and white piece, so if you talk about color, the color black and the color white, you're not going to get any points. Make sure you don't mention color. These would be values. If you're going to talk about the value shifts, or the density of the line, or the quality of the line. There's a lot of line quality in here. He's using ink, he's using pencil, and so on. So this is a drawing. Remember, it's a drawing, right? So there's a lot of information here that has to do with elements and principles, but don't assume that it is the familiar things that you feel comfortable writing about. Really look at this piece and see if you're starting to understand what it's asking you to look at and what it's portraying. Again, abstracted, it's not highly representational. There's some representational elements in here. So pick that apart and start to talk about the formal aspects of it and a little bit of the content, the meaning, and see if you feel like it does portray that and how. Okay, so good luck with it, and email me with questions.